Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our reading of The Swiss Family Robinson. Today's chapter, The Pinnace and the Petard. Let's get started. Having now discovered how to provide bread for my family, my thoughts began to revert to the wreck and all the valuables that contained within it. Above all, I was bent on acquiring possession of the beautiful Pinnace. Unaware that our united efforts would be required to do the necessary work, I began to coax and persuade the mother to let me go in force with all her boys except Franz. She very unwillingly gave her consent at last, but not until I had faithfully promised never to pass a night on board. I did so with reluctance, and we parted, neither feeling quite satisfied with the arrangement. The boys were delighted to go in so large a party, and merely carried provision bags filled with cassava bread and potatoes. Reaching Safety Bay without adventure, we first paid a visit to the geese and ducks which inhabited the marsh there, and having fed them and seen they were thriving well, we buckled on each his cork belt, stepped into the tugboat, and, with the raft in tow, steered straight for the wreck. When we got on board, I desired the boys to collect whatever came first to hand, and load the raft to be ready for our return at night, and then we made a minute inspection of the pinnace. I came to the conclusion that difficulties well nigh inseparable lay between me and the safe position of the beautiful little vessel. She lay in a most unget-at-able position at the farther end of the hold, stowed in so confined and narrow a space that it was impossible to think of fitting the parts together there. At the same time, these parts were so heavy that removing them to a convenient place piece by piece was equally out of the question. I sent the boys away to amuse themselves by rummaging out anything they liked to carry away, and sat down quietly to consider the matter. As my eyes became used to the dim light which entered the compartment through a chink or crevice here and there, I perceived how carefully every part of the pinnace was arranged and marked with numbers, so that if only I could bestow sufficient time on the work, and contrive space in which to execute it, I might reasonably hope for success. Room to work in, boys. That's what we need in the first place, I cried as my sons came to see what plan I had devised, for so great was their reliance on me that they never doubted the pinnace was to be ours. Fetch axes and let us break down the compartment and clear space all round. To work we all went, yet evening drew near and but little impression had been made on the massive woodwork around us. We had to acknowledge that an immense amount of labor and perseverance would be required before we could call ourselves the owners of the useful and elegant little craft, which lay within this vast hulk like a fossil shell embedded in a rock. Preparations for returning to shore were hastily made, and we landed without much relish for the long walk to Falconhurst. To our great surprise and pleasure, we found the mother and little Franz at Tentholm awaiting us. She resolved to take up her quarters there during the time we should be engaged on the wreck. In that way you won't live nearer your work, and I shall not quite lose sight of you, said she with a pleasant smile. You are a good, sensible, and kind wife, I exclaimed, delighted with her plan, and we shall work with the greater diligence that you may return as soon as possible to your dear Falconhurst. Come and see what we have brought you, Muller, cried Fritz. A good addition to your stores, is it not? He and his brothers exhibited 2 small casks of butter, 3 of flour, corn, rice, and many other articles welcome to our careful housewife. Our days were now spent in hard work on board, first cutting and clearing an open space round the pinnace, and then putting the parts together. We started early and returned at night, bringing each time a valuable freight from the old vessel. At length, with incredible labor, all was completed. The pinnacle stood actually ready to be launched, but imprisoned within massive wooden walls which defied our strength. It seemed exactly as though the graceful vessel had awakened from sleep and was longing to spring into the free blue sea and spread her wings to the breeze. I could not bear to think that our success so far should be followed by failure and disappointment. Yet no possible means of setting her free could I conceive, and I was almost in despair when an idea occurred to me which, if I could carry it out, would effect her release without further labor or delay. Without explaining my purpose, I got a large cast iron mortar, filled it with gunpowder, secured a block of oak to the top, through which I pierced a hole for the insertion of the match, and this great petard I so placed that when it exploded it should blow out the side of the vessel next to which the pinnace lay. Then securing it with chains, that the recoil might do no damage, I told the boys I was going ashore earlier than usual, and calmly desired them to get into the boat. Then lighting a match I had prepared, and which would burn some time before reaching the powder, I hastened after them with a beating heart, and we made for the land. We brought the raft close inshore and began to unload it. The other boat I did not haul up, but kept her ready to put off at a moment's notice. My anxiety was unobserved by anyone as I listened with strained nerves for the expected sound. It came. A flash, a mighty roar, a grand burst of smoke. My wife and children, terror-stricken, turned their eyes toward the sea, whence the startling noise came, and then, in fear and wonder, looked to me for some explanation. Perhaps, said the miller, as I did not speak, perhaps you have left a light burning near some of the gunpowder, and an explosion has taken place. Not at all unlikely, replied I quietly. We had a fire below when we were calking the seams of the pinnace. I shall go off at once and see what has happened. Will anyone come? The boys needed no second invitation, but sprang into the boat while I lingered to reassure my wife by whispering a few words of explanation, and then joining them. We pulled for the wreck at a more rapid rate than we ever had done before. No alteration had taken place in the side at which we usually boarded her. and we pulled round to the farther side where a marvellous sight awaited us. A huge rent appeared. The decks and bulwarks were torn open. The water was covered with floating wreckage, all seemed in ruins, and the compartment where the pinnace rested was fully revealed to view. There sat the little beauty to all appearance, uninjured. The boys, whose attention was taken up with the melancholy scene of ruin and confusion around them, were astonished to hear me shout in enthusiastic delight. Hooray! She is ours! The lovely pinnace is won. We shall be able to launch her easily after all. Come, boys, let us see if she has suffered from the explosion which has set her free. The boys gazed at me for a moment, and then guessing my secret, you planned it yourself, you clever, cunning faller. All that machine we helped you make was on purpose to blow it up, cried they. Eagerly they followed me into the shattered opening, where to my intense satisfaction I found everything as I could wish, and the captive in no way a sufferer from the violent measures I had adopted for her deliverance. It was evident that the launching could now be effected without much trouble. I had been careful to place the rollers beneath the keel, so that by means of levers and pulleys we might with our united strength move her forward toward the water. A rope was attached, by which to regulate the speed of the descent, and then all hands putting their shoulders to work, the pinnace began to slide from the stocks, and finally slipped gently and steadily into the water, where she floated as if conscious it was her native element, while we, wild with excitement, cheered and raved enthusiastically. We then only remained long enough to secure our prize carefully at the most sheltered point, and went back to Tentholm, where we accounted for the explosion, saying that having blown away one side of the ship, we should be able to obtain the rest of its contents with a very few more days' work. These days were devoted to completing the rigging, the mounting of her two little brass guns, and all necessary arrangements about the pinnace. It was wonderful what martial ardor was awakened by the possession of a vessel armed with two wheeled guns. The boys chattered incessantly about savages, fleets of canoes, attack, defense, and final annihilation of the invaders. The pinnace was fully equipped and ready to sail. While yet no idea of the surprise we were preparing for her had dawned upon my wife, I permitted the boys, who had kept the secret so well, to fire a salute when we entered the bay. Casting off from the ship and splitting the sail, our voyage began. The pinnace glided swiftly through the water. I stood at the helm. Ernest and Jack commanded the guns, and Fritz gave the word of command. Fire! Bang! Bang! Rattled out a rolling report, which echoed and re-echoed among the cliffs, followed by our shouts and hurrahs. The mother and her little boy rushed hastily forward from near the tent, and we could plainly see their alarm and astonishment. But speedily recognizing us, they waved joyfully and came quickly to the landing place to meet us. By skillful management, we brought the pinnace near a projection of the bank, and Fritz assisted her mother to come on board, where, breathless with haste and excitement, she exclaimed, You dear, horrid, wonderful people, shall I scold you or praise you? You have frightened me out of my wits. To see a beautiful little ship come sailing in was startling enough, for I cannot conceive who might be on board, but the report of your guns made me tremble with fear, and had I not recognized your voices directly after, I should have run away with France. Heaven knows where, but have you really done all this work yourselves? She continued, when we had been forgiven for terrifying her with our vainglorious salute. What a charming little yacht! I should not be afraid to sail in this myself. After the Pinnace had been shown off and received the admiration she deserved, while our industry, skill, and perseverance met with boundless praise, now, said my wife, you must come with me and see how little France and I have improved our time every day of your absence. We all landed and with great curiosity followed the Muller up the river toward the cascade. There, to our astonishment, we found a garden neatly laid out in beds and walks. She continued, we don't frighten people by firing salutes in honor of our performances, although by and by I too shall want fire in a peaceable form. Look at my beds of lettuce and cabbages, my rows of beans and peas. Think what delicious dinners I shall be able to cook for you and give me credit for my diligence. My dear wife, I exclaimed, this is beautiful. You have done wonders. Did you not find the work too hard? The ground is light and easy to dig hereabouts, she replied. I have planted potatoes and cassava roots. There is space for sugar cane and the young fruit trees, and I shall want you to contrive to irrigate them by leading water from the cascades and hollow bamboos. Up on the sheltering rocks, I mean to have pineapples and melons. They will look splendid when they are spread there. To shelter the beds of European vegetables from the heat of the sun, I have planted seeds of maize round them. The shadow of the tall plants will afford protection from the burning rays. Do you think that is a good plan? I do indeed. The whole arrangement is capital. Now, as sunset approaches, we must return to the tent for supper and rest, for both of which we are all quite ready. And that will be all for today. I'll see you all next time. See ya!